Hope everyone is doing well. Looking forward to another glorious weekend. So, last time I spoke about the importance of sleep, how it's fundamentally important. Guess what? So, I basically said I need to stack several days of consecutive 7 hours and 15 plus hours of sleep. And guess what? I got 15 hours. 15 hours of sleep. So, and here's the thing. Last time I was talking about when I was younger, I could 4 or 5 hours and then, I'd be a track athlete, right? But that doesn't mean it was the best thing for you, because I was getting sick a lot, you know? So that doesn't necessarily mean just because I was able to do it that it was the healthiest thing, the best thing. So you just basically, like anything, you get used to it. So now I find if I'm having poor sleep, like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, it's going to take me days of being on a run of having ample sleep. It's almost like vitamin D3 buildup in the body or something else that builds, like as far as storage is concerned, and then once you have that, then it's like, okay, I'm good now. Like I'm recharged, and the recharge doesn't just happen off of one good day anymore, which is, I don't know what that means. I don't know if it's an aging thing, who knows? But for me, it takes days of having proper sleep in a row. So I got my 15 hours, and before, if I got 15 hours, I would feel incredibly sluggish. That day, I feel fine right now. Actually, I feel energetic. I feel good. Like I feel like I'm myself again. Like I can do things, which is awesome, right? So sleep, nailed it. Feel good. Now, I actually had to force myself. But once I finally did, and my body, because I have to regulate temperature at the same time. And when the temperature is right, because that's important for sleep, you kind of have to be a little cold, right? And then you regulate it to where it's just right, and then the conditions are good, right? Probably have to not have devices too close to you. Probably have to have a certain level of Goku, what's up? Lighting that's like off, all these things. I got 15 hours. Great. So topic of discussion today. Oh, them tangents. And forgive me for my speaking style. I'm sure over time I'll get better at it because everything is off the cuff, right? So we'll just get better over time. Like I always say, fail forward, right? So I was looking at Social Security, and in order, I would say for the majority of people who are waiting for Social Security, which means it's probably you were born after 1960, and I hope your mom gets that, Brent. I hope she does. And if you were born after 1960, then you are going to get the maximum amount of Social Security that you would get after the age of 67. Okay? So basically, if you want to get the earliest as far as how old you would be, if I'm not mistaken, 62. Yeah, 62. But if you want to get the max, it would be closer to almost 70, right? So if you make like over $100,000, like if you average over $100,000 a year throughout your, your work history, then Social Security would give you $3,000 a month, right? Now, if you made half of that over the average of your work history, like $50,000 roughly, you would get like $1,500 a month. That's a big difference, right? But if you make like $25,000 over the course of your work history, then surprisingly, you would get about $1,200 a month. So think about that, right? Think about, even though, inflation is going on, because in this country, in the US, I'm talking about, inflation is crazy, right? So the US dollar is just like on decline. However, Emmy, what's up? However, if you go to another country, and let's just say you take your $12, $15, or $3,000 a month on Social Security and you go elsewhere, it might not be worth so much in California or New York City, because you would need, because $3,000 a month for someone who averaged $100,000 a year, that's like less than $40,000 a year, right? And to be at a mediocre range in California and New York City, you would have to make over $100,000 a year. So like if you make $36,000 a year, you can do the math and see how that's not too kosher, right? So going to another country with that Social Security makes a lot of sense to normal people. And remember, if you only made $25,000 a year over the course of your work history, you're still making over $1,000 a month in Social Security. At $1,200, $1,300 a month, and you go to a relatively decent country, now it's like the equivalent of making over $100,000 a year, living in like New York City or whatever the big city is in that country. Okay, that was my tangent anyways. I just putting that out there because I thought it was for people to know, because that leads me to the topic of discussion: how I prevented my brain from shrinking over the last 15 years, right? Over the last decade and a half. Now, this is not like I took tests and had, detailed analysis of my brain and I'm able to verify that. No, I'm going off of, this is purely anecdotal because of the way I'm able to approach many tasks in front of me. Okay. So when I look at the way my brain had functioned and how it now functions, there's a clear difference, right? Because I'm living here inside myself, right? So I know what's happening with the way I'm able to do things, whether it's scholastically or common sense wise, street wise, whatever it is I'm doing, right? So there's a clear difference. So now there are a lot of things, like, I talk about these things all the time, right? I spoke about sleep, the importance of sleep, and how that reduces cortisol, right? That's a natural balance right there. The more sleep you get and consistently, the less cortisol, right? Sleep, cortisol, right? And cortisol is your stress hormone. So if your stress is going down naturally, then it's not as difficult for you to fight to get your stress down. right? That's very important. Hydration. Your body is at least 60% comprised of water, right? And I don't know what this is, but I have no, let me try something here. I just got distracted. What is this? What is a Q&A? Brand you're loyal to. No, I want to change that. How do I even do something different? Okay, that's gone. Throw me off, right? Okay. Okay, so I said at least 60%, AJ. If you are so intelligent about what that is, at least 60%, are you telling me the body is comprised of 30% water? You tell me, since you're so knowledgeable and I know nothing about what I'm talking about. You tell me. Anyway, I appreciate you, Cran. So, before you blurt out, let me finish speaking. Now, again, the body is comprised of at least 60%. Whether it's 70% or 75%, it's at least 60%. And you know that's true. So, with that being said, you know the value of hydration is up there, right? So sleep is important. The value of hydration is extremely important. And we know movement is extremely important, right? So movement can be anything, right? It can be walking. It can be especially resistance, right? Resistance training is extremely important. And some cardio. Cardio can come in any form. You can do cardio through resistance, right? Depending on your intensity. So I'm just putting these things out there because, you know, you stack all these things together, right? And this is how I did it. And again, this could be anecdotal, but there's a clear difference from me being in my 20s to, you know, decades later. So other than that, I would say how you, and this is pertaining to cognitive health in general, being curious and explorative about wanting to learn is a very important facet to not having your brain shrink, right? So let me give you a couple examples, right? So YouTube, since we're in YouTube land right here, right? In the beginning of the stream, I mentioned, you know, forgive me for my speaking style. I'll get better over time, right? I will. You get better at anything, right? You practice cooking more often, you'll get better at that, right? You practice dancing more often, you'll get better at that. You practice exercise, push-ups, whatever, you'll get better at it, right? So if you practice speaking, you'll get better at it. Now, when it comes to doing these live streams, this is the biggest challenge because I could have just kept doing shorts all day and videos and whatnot. And, you know, because for me, music it's great for the brain because I have to challenge myself to come out with metaphors and clever, non-corny ways of saying things that make you think, right? So that is like in and of itself, within staying true to the art form, I'm challenging my brain. And because I do that, that helps with cognitive health, right? That's an example. Doing these live streams, and because I'm curious to figure out how to get good at doing this, then I have to now work my brain to understand not just the algorithm, but what actually works and what doesn't. So that's being curious to figure out how in YouTube land we get, a powerful community together. Now, another thing that is important, right, over my last decade and a half, anecdotally speaking, is languages. So when you work on languages, you are going to work your brain, because you have to think away from just whatever your mother tongue is, right? That is crazy. I literally just got kicked off my own live stream and noticed that the live stream is still live, and then figured out how to get back on. Who knows? Okay. I don't know how long that was, that there was an interruption on the live stream, but last thing I said was I was talking about languages, right? So you have to think in that culture, right? So you have to, okay, if let's say my original language is English, right? And I am always thinking in American culture, let's just say. So now if I'm trying to master another language, I have to not just think in American culture and how this language goes, but actually lean in towards whatever the language and that culture is. So with that being said, because at some point in this stream, I was mentioning Social Security and how you can take your Social Security, and although the power of the dollar is however it is over here, the power of the dollar as a world reserve currency is extremely powerful around the world, right? So if you go somewhere where the mother tongue is a different language elsewhere, you would have to then shift your way of thinking to that culture and that language. And then it's like, okay, you're always having to work your brain to be able to think that way. You ever notice how someone who speaks a second language or a third language, like that, they could flip their accent, if they speak English, their accent could just change like that. That's because they have to flip away from whatever culture they're into that culture. And that's powerful because now you're using your brain in a dynamic way, so I think that's one of the most powerful things that you can do. I'm not talking about Babel or Rosetta Stone when that was popular. No, I'm talking about actually immersing yourself in the culture, so I did that. I was dabbling with, and no exaggeration, 7 different languages, right? And if you think that's a joke, or if you think that's like Mrs. Know-It-All AJ, how dumb I am, right? About 60% water, when I said at least 60%, right? Which is factual. You can fact check me on that, right? I didn't say 60%, I said at least. Whether it's 70, 75, I'm not telling you exactly what it is. I'm telling you at least 60. So, Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Urdu, Hindi, Putongwa, Mandarin, traditional that is, and Espanol. So 8 languages, and I'm not including English, be in ninth, or I don't have to study that necessarily, even though I'm a student for life. So 8 languages, right? Now, I learned how to read and write pretty much all of them. Did I retain it all? Probably not. But during that time, I was working my brain, especially Chinese. I mean, I'm appreciative. Mandarin only has 4 tones, whereas like Cantonese has like almost like double that, you know, like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 tones, whatever it is, right? I was getting a headache every time I was, practicing Mandarin. So it was like, it was almost like my brain was getting sore doing what I was doing. It's like I could literally feel my brain growing, out of my skull. I'm being exaggerated, but like I would literally get headaches because I was trying to challenge myself so much, So with all that being said, I don't want this to go too crazy. It's already 17 minutes, but that's how I did it over the last decade and a half. And how I intend on building off of that, looking forward, is all these habits that I mentioned, the working out, etc. You just want to get better at everything, right? Stack momentum, keep building off of everything. I'll keep doing these live streams. And what I mentioned about language and culture, yeah, instead of like 8 of them, I'll probably stick to 1. And with that 1, I'll get as good as I can and learn as much as I can and take you all on the journey with me, and I think that's powerful. That's how I did it. That's how I plan on moving forward. And I hope this was useful, and that's really it. I'm going to leave it at that.